Go ahead.
So, like, which term do you use to describe yourself? Like Native American, First Persons, Indigenous people, Indian?
I will use Native American or Indigenous.
How do you feel about the term Indian being used to describe Indigenous people?
Indian for me reminds me of a time when what we would call colonizers would call you. They would call you an Indian or a savage. A lot of times now people get confused with the term Indian because they think Asian Indian or, you know, other cultures who would claim themselves as Indian. So we tried to like distinguish ourselves. It's kind of weird because some of us don't like the term Native American because it wasn't America per se when we were discovered.
Yeah.
We were always indigenous. We were a First Nations people is what we would call the first people.
Okay, and also, how do you feel about football teams with mascots like the Redskins, or even a term like that being used? Because it sounds derogatory to me, but how do you feel?
I've talked to quite a few people who are indigenous, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. The way we thought of it was a way of being remembered that we are still here. You know, yeah, I mean, I guess there are some tribes who prefer not to call them Redskins, the term Redskin, because obviously our skin's not red. But like the Braves, you know, there was another team that they took away. There's so many different things in our culture that were being taken away, and they claim that we were so offended, but there are so many of us who were not asked. There were so many tribes who were not, you know, asked, hey, how do you feel about this? And a lot of the tribes and a lot of people that I know are honestly not too happy. I mean, you change Washington Redskins to the Commanders. I don't think that's any better. It's kind of a slap in the face for us.
Yeah.
So going off of that, do you feel like, you know, in our non-indigenous Americans attempt to like remove offensive things, do you worry at all that maybe like we're getting rid of the only references to indigenous culture in wider pop culture? Like, should we have asked indigenous people what they should replace the mascot with if we weren't going to keep the one they had, like instead of commanders or guardians or whatever? Could we do something else that was indigenous but more widely accepted?
Absolutely. I think if somebody had asked or had talked to some tribal leaders and really actually had the thought or the question, the discussion, you know, is this offensive? What would you guys prefer if it wasn't this? I think that should have been a conversation had, because we already fight to be made aware or make people aware that we are still here. So when you're taking away things like that, it's almost like we're having to fight even harder to say, hey, we still exist. Our bloodline still exists. We are still here. We are still a people who are still here. There may not be very many of us, but we're still here. So when you take away those, it just becomes twice as hard. You know, we have, there's indigenous rappers now. There's indigenous models now. There are indigenous actors now. And we're still fighting to be in that, I don't want to say limelight or that spotlight, but to say, hey, like, we can do the same things. We are still present. We're not what you think we are. It
like
should be discussed.
There are positive contributions to pop culture that, like, we don't just need to remove everything because it's all offensive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're not the only culture it's happening to, sadly.
Right.
And my final question is, going back off to pop culture, how do you feel about the representation of Native Americans in pop culture? Like Pocahontas, or recently the Killers of the Flower Moon did a really good job, in my opinion, of showing indigenous people. But what do you think?
I think that movie was spectacular. I think they did shed light on a lot of truth, especially for that particular tribe. I think they did a phenomenal job on representing us as a whole, as a people.
What about Pocahontas, the more classic representation from what I grew up with?
Pocahontas. So Disney, I always like to say they played that off very well. They modernized it so much that they made it completely false. Pocahontas was not in her teens when she met John Smith. She was actually a young girl, I want to say about 9 or 10. And she didn't fall in love with this man. She had originally become his translator, and then later on was dismembered in Europe. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, there's a lot of things that, like Thanksgiving, people don't know. You know, they think, oh, this was a great time. You know, natives taught them this, and they bonded or whatever. That was not the case. A lot of Native Americans still do not eat the day before, the day of, or the day after Thanksgiving because it was not a time of gathering. It wasn't a time of, you know, we're bonding or we've made peace. It was massacre. You think about the Holocaust and they say, oh, this was the greatest massacre in the world, but it wasn't. There was a Trail of Tears before that. There was Wounded Knee. There was so many other ones where we were piled in hills, bodies just piled, just rotting away. And then, like Wounded Knee, they buried them all in this huge one-piece hole, and they just threw all the bodies together.
Wow.
There's a lot of truth that's not shed. There's a lot of facts that are not shed, that are not out there, and it needs to be told. I wear this hand on my face because the media does not talk about it. They haven't talked about it. They've done nothing about it. The government's done nothing about it. There are so many of us who go missing, who are murdered, who are not put on social media. It generally falls to us and our own people to put it out in the media for it to go anywhere. Nobody knows realistically what this hand symbolizes. And it is for missing and murdered Indigenous people. And there's a lot of us. If you see an orange or Every Child Matters, somebody should be looking into the history of Native American boarding schools for kids. There's a lot of survivors. There's a lot of people who suffered for speaking their native language because that was the only language that they knew. People were beaten. These kids were beaten for speaking their native language, that they lost it over time. Cutting their hair, you know, making them change their names, making them dress a certain way. There are a lot of those survivors still out there. It should be talked about.
Thank you very much for the questions.
Just one last thing.
Okay.
You know, what can people do to learn more?
I would say it's very simple. Google search, or come somewhere like here where there are several people you can talk to. There are a lot of resources online. There are, like November's Native American Month, Native American Heritage Month. A lot of the museums are doing displays. A lot of them are doing seminars or like lesson teaching. There are some in different states who are doing like where they will teach you like 3, 4, 5 words in native language. There's so many resources out there. You have to search it. I would say the best thing to do is just to be proactive. You can travel to a different state where there's Native American reservation land and find natives there. You can, I mean, the sky's the limit, really. I mean, there's stuff in books. I just don't think people read them anymore or think to go look at a library or know where to look. But the world is modernized. Everything's at your fingertips. Everybody has a cell phone. It's not that complicated.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us. What's your name and what tribe are you from?
Yes, my name is Matthew Davila. My Lakota name is Iaka Ianke Luza, which is running Swift Elk. I'm an enrolled member from the federally recognized tribe of Standing Rock up in North Dakota. And I live down here in Texas, so I'm Texan now. I've been here since 2011, and I don't miss the winters.
I don't miss the summers here, but I'm still here, so whatever. All right, so the first thing I'd like to ask is, do you speak your tribe's indigenous language?
I sing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can sing it. Speaking it and singing it is totally, singing is a little bit more easier.
So not necessarily conversational?
No. Every once in a while, like that, my Lakota name, I can say that. I can speak that. Different phrases. It wasn't taught to me by my mom. She's the one that's enrolled with Standing Rock, and that's where I get my my I guess lineage, but I didn't start learning our culture until after I graduated high school, living in Colorado and then moving to rural North Dakota. There's there's just a different, it's a culture shock that happened, and I kind of immersed myself into our culture then because it was prevalent. The languages, like around here, you hear Spanish, but then I can pick up Spanish, and then there's also I can hear some of the indigenous language come out, and I'm like, wondering where they came from or whatever, but they're either Central American, so you can hear that language. So, but yeah, I wasn't really taught our language. I had to learn it through singing, and yeah.
Do you think, are there any like programs or support to preserve and revitalize your tribe's language?
Not down here. Yeah, not down here. I don't think. I know earlier they had this group discussion about the Native American Studies education program being implemented here in Texas, and that would help out a lot as far as programming wise. That would mean we would be able to have the other diverse cultures or diverse tribes that are down here. They would be able to learn their language. As far as like for myself, for my tribe, we're in like pockets. We're in Dallas, Fort Worth. As far as Lakota and Dakota, we're down here, Central Texas, and then also down towards the southern part of Texas. So, been trying to figure out how to come up with funding to do a Zoom or something with and hire somebody from our home base who can speak fluently, and there's been a resurgence of education to provide funding for language preservation, just because we're still learning it. And there's tribes down here that are still learning their language because it was taken. I mean, it was beaten from them.
Right.
Or they decided to hide within the missions to become something different,
Right.
which wasn't, but they need to do that to survive. So.
Right. So what do you think about certain words like Native American, Indigenous, Indian, First Nations? Like, what term do you prefer?
So I prefer Lakota or Dakota. That's who I am.
Right, it's individual tribe names.
Yeah, but I know some elders, I heard that they don't mind being called American Indian because that's how they were told who they were a long time ago.
Yeah, like this event I heard was sponsored by Great Promises for American Indians, right? Yeah. And we see it all over, like Indian tacos, Indian food, and like they use it all the time. So we found that a bit surprising because I guess in our non-Indigenous discourse, it seems like everyone's trying to avoid that word now. But do you think Indigenous people are really as offended by it as maybe the rest of us think, or some are, some aren't?
I think it's been ingrained so long where if you're fed that over and over and over again, generation after generation, then it's going to become accustomed to being okay to be called.
It's kind of like at this point that's just what it is.
Yeah. So, but until somebody actually comes up and says they're offended by it, then it's. I was even told where I used to work that it just slipped out. I'm American Indian. I'm not. So they're like, you're Indian. I'm like, yeah. They're like, what kind? kind. Like, are you 7-Eleven or casino? It's like, whoa, this came from a military guy. You know, I'm like, wow, okay. You know, so there's that. You know, but I don't even know how the Eastern Indian people,
Right.
you know, feel. I really wouldn't mind, you know, having a conversation with, you know, some of them and see what they think.
Yeah. And how do you feel about some like high schools and especially pro sports teams changing their names or mascots? You know, they change from the Indians or the Reds or whatever it is to go to something non-offensive.
Yeah, so I get that question a lot, and the only thing I say is that it's not the name, it's the opposing team. Opposing team are the ones who are doing all the monikers and all the, you know, whatever. But it's all, you know, it's, you know, that people have an issue with, you know, the Redskins. The Redskins, you know, changed their name to Commanders. You know, and I know there's our own native people are wanting to still keep that name. Chiefs. So I was told a long time ago that the word redskin meant they weren't talking about your skin, talking about when you pull the scalp back, the red underneath.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. So why would you be called that? You know, why would you want to be? You know, if you really wanted to know the truth, ask somebody. There's a lot of people my age and younger that know the truth about, you know, some of these nicknames and what. But the other thing too is that if you want it changed, I think personally too that I think some of the reservation schools should change their names too, because you can't have, you know, it'd be, I don't know. It seems like it's more. It's approved or whatever, you know, with the reservation schools to be called Redskins or whatever, you know. It's just I don't know. So,
Do you think that maybe in our attempt to remove offensive names from things like sports teams, that we're potentially also removing the only representation of Native Americans in pop culture? Should we at least consult natives to see what names we could change it to that's maybe not offensive, that still represents culture?
yeah, so that's when they have to take the time and talk, communicate. That's all. You just reach out and talk to some of these tribes. You know, if there's a question about anything, you know, they can, you know, hire me as a consultant. I can go ahead and be that bridge, be that. So, you know, same thing with just being open about, you know, asking some of the tribes. You know, let them know. But the other thing too is that the tribes got to understand they're not trying to be offensive to ask. You know, it's just it's just being naive. You know, I mean, it's nobody's fault.
Right.
You know, it's just they don't know. So that's where some of us are here to educate them on, you know, simple communication. So
Yeah, excellent. And last question. What can people or what should people do to learn more? And is there anything else you want people to know?
yeah, it's so like I said, communication is the key. You know, you really got if people really want to understand and know more about the powwows here. Powwows are they're social gathering, but powwows like this is a competition powwow. So you get people from all over the place that come here. But I think that if there was more communication between everybody, that you know, it's okay to ask a question. It's okay to ask a stupid question. Then there'll be some of us there to guide people that way. So hopefully we can find a solution to some of these issues. So
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you. All right. What's your name and what tribe are you from?
My English name is Charlotte McKimmey, but my indigenous name is Panamidash Hefte, which means ladybug.
Nice.
Yes.
And you said
I
you
am
came from like, Fort-
Yep, I am Pokagon Potawatomi, basically Huron and Ottawa, to shorten it all up.
All right, excellent. And you said you didn't originally, but now you're learning your tribe's indigenous language?
Yes, I am an adopted child outside of the reservation, so I had to find my way back. And it just so happens that we had 8 elders back in '98 who were still fluently speaking Potawatomi. And we've lost like 4 of them now. No, we're down to 2 of them. And so we were able to record our vocabulary, so we were able to start reteaching it. And that's been in the process with the Potawatomis now for at least a good 7 years now they've been reteaching it. So I'm just now starting to learn my language.
Excellent. That's excellent. A lot of people, don't even get that chance to record their language.
Some
That's
of
really
it's
cool. Yeah.
unfortunately gone.
Do you have any idea maybe how many people like you are now learning to revive that language?
Out of the 8 that were remaining, and we were able to record and basically get a dictionary going and preservation, we have actually now got language instructors. They come in, we're actually already at 3 different levels now. So there's beginner, there's intermediate, and there's advanced. And so that's what our tribe has going on right now.
Nice, awesome. And if I could ask you, what do you think about terms like Indian? Like, this event was sponsored by Great Promises for American Indians. We see it on the signs over here. It seems a lot more used than we probably expected before coming here. So what do you think about words like that, or First Nations, individual tribe names? Like, what term would you prefer to refer to the people?
An original.
Original?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that the word Indian has been a name that was kind of adapted from other cultures and kind of titled over us. So I know there are many people that don't really want to associate, but there's Aboriginal, there's Indigenous, and I like to be referred to as an original.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very nice to meet you. I'm glad y'all came out,
Thank you.
and I hope y'all enjoyed this. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
A lot of, especially in Texas, because a lot of the tribes here weren't acknowledged, A lot of the tribes here were just kind of like considered mestizos or mixed, right? Mm-hmm. Mexican. And one of the things that happens when you do a genocide, we don't want to acknowledge that genocide, so what we do is we do erasery. And so there's power in that. There's power in knowing your identity, knowing where you come from. And so being here at the Powwow, it's really good because there's more South Texas and there's more Central Texas people acknowledging the people of this land.
Yeah, and I think a big part of identity is language and how we identify ourselves. So, like for you, there's lots of words that we can use, like First People, Indigenous, but people also use the term Indian. I'm seeing it a lot here, like that sign that says Indian tacos. How do you feel about these different terms, and Indian in particular?
I don't have an attachment to it because, that's what they knew, right? So a lot of the people who, from the 50s and 40s and on down, it's how they grew up, you know what I mean? Apache, that's my tribe, right? We didn't even call ourselves Apache. We called ourselves Ninde, which meant the people. But should I get mad at people who have no ignorance? It's all just like, to me, an expression of that evolution of what's happening in our consciousness. And so you just gotta have grace and forgiveness. For me, as a Native woman, that's just how I feel.
So when it comes to forgiveness, how do you feel about people using terms like Redskins to talk about like the football team, or having mascots like the Fighting Indians? How does that make you feel?
Again, it goes back to erasery, right? Like the fact that there wasn't a genocide that happened here, but actually there was. And lots of babies, women, could you imagine, a mother walking on the Trail of Tears and having to give up where she had just come from give up everything that she's known to go be put on a reservation and things like that. So I think that there's definitely some more harmful terms. And I think redskin and those things it's kind of like, I don't want to say it, but like the N-word.
No, it
you
really,
know?
yeah.
And it does hurt because it reminds you of like your place. No, you aren't a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You're not meant to live and breathe and prosper, and you're basically subhuman. And so in that regard, you know, the Apache in me would come out. But you know, you got to pick and choose your battles, right?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
And for me, it's more of like, for my people, what's more important is like making sure that we get health care, making sure that we get education. You know, like there's so many, my tribe in particular is very impoverished. We don't have access to, you know, education and health care or our land that we are probably standing on. You know, we don't have our own tribal grounds that we can go and celebrate and, you know, passings of time, like coming of age ceremonies. So that would be where my heart and focus would be. And I would, as much as it angers me or pisses me off, excuse my language, that there's still that like racism or that like, I would rather focus on the young ones.
Yeah, and you mentioned the genocide. When you have something like that happen to a community, they lose a lot, like their language. So how do you feel about, do you understand any of the Apache language or what language that your tribe would speak?
So my grandfather, he knew much more than I did, and he was also raised by his grandmother. But I don't have that, right? And that's part of that erasery, is like losing your language, losing your identity. And it's just about taking those steps. There are some though that in my community that have, you know, like some of my cousins that have taken it as their life's mission to bring it back so that we can live again. So that the young ones might know what we call that in our words.
Do you mentioned the word for people. Do you know any other words in the language?
Yeah, absolutely. Yatahe.
Yatahe.
Yatahe. It's like a welcoming, or it's like a hello, or
That's good.
like what's up?
Yeah, yatahe. I like that.
Yatahe.
Do you know thank you at all? That's another I heard another tribe used yoko ki was thank you. I can't remember what tribe told me that. But.
So I know that the Apaches have like 6 or 7 different ways of saying thank you, which I think is cool, you know, that they would have that many ways of saying thank you. The one that I know is Aish.
Aish.
Aish, which is the spelling of that is IXCHE. Aish.
Wow. And one last question. How do you feel about any ways to learn more about this? Like, what are some resources we can have to learn more about your culture and your people?
You know, it's really sad because that's what sent me on my own filmmaking journey, right? You know, I went to the library. There's like 4 books about the Lipan Apaches, all written by one white dude, and it's like and you know, and I went to all my filmmaker friends. I was like, come on, you got to make this movie. They're like, no, you got to make this movie. And so I did, in my own, you know, trying to seek, you know, the preservation of the tribes here in Texas, not just the Lipan Apaches, but there's a lot of tribes here that we don't know about. The Carrizo Como Crudo, the Cuauhtecans. There's so many tribes here that we've forgotten about. And so in my own search to help that preservation, I did. It's called Keep the Fire Lit. And I always encourage the youth and anyone else, like, make another one. Yeah. Make more, because it's so vital to keep those stories alive. Go talk to someone who's 80 years old. Mm-hmm. You know, go talk to them because they're the ones that have the stories, and you know, and take care of them. We got to take care of our old people because you know, they get lonely.
Yeah, elders are very important within the Native American community, especially, I've noticed.
There are libraries. Once they're gone, that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions you want me to ask? Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.